What's up, everyone? Welcome to my channel. Welcome back. Good to see everybody. Even though I can't see you. But I have a new video, or this video is going to be describing a new article that I put out on my Substack. And it involves Jeffrey Epstein. Kind of some new territory for me, even though I've been kind of all wrapped up in Epstein stuff since I started working on that book that we were going to publish, but it never got published, and it's not going to be published, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but I basically, with these new emails that came out, I just decided, you know what, it's such a hot topic right now, and I might as well see what there is for any kind of connection to the biological warfare, biodefense, biosecurity, public health, and of course there are a lot of connections, and there are a lot of emails showing all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's really disturbing, to know that a guy like Jeffrey Epstein could be all wrapped up in matters of biodefense and public health, and especially vaccines. And there are many emails where he is corresponding with people from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, advising them on how to tackle disease, all sorts of stuff. I'll tell you. So there's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation advisor, Boris Nikolic. So he was, there are emails between him and Jeffrey Epstein, and they're talking about bioengineering and making synthetic biology and viruses, exploiting technologies that operate without regulatory framework. It says, and I'll read it. It says, during our discussion yesterday, we briefly mentioned synthetic biology and viruses. During last few years, some new great tools were generated, common repository of tools, sequences created, and common platform established. Most of that without regulatory framework. That means laws, without going by laws. It says, I am attaching you some relevant basic references to learn more. I do have friends working in these areas. Biosecurity paper is written by my dear friend Jonathan. Let me know if you want to dig into more details. In addition, availability of information as well as cheap, used instruments is like never before. It is, and this next part is pretty disturbing. He says, it is a question of time when the critical mass is reached and when something will go wrong. I bet that most likely something will go bad, not because of bad intentions to hurt people, terrorism and such, but rather because of the fact that biology is much more unpredictable and thus uncontrollable, and that often consequences are opposite what we initially expected. Right? So he lists, he says, please note interesting sites such as MIT that are devoted to building the Registry of Standard Biological Parts is a collection of parts, sequences of DNA with specific function that can be combined together to implement more complex functions. These parts are called biobricks. You can place order for various biobricks. And he leaves a link. And he leaves another link and says that provides open source for sharing of information, know-how, protocols for people interested in biological engineering. He says, still, it is too early for real design and bioengineering of lethal weapons, even for a large biotech company with a number of professionals. The fact is that the level of complexity is much higher in biology than in many other disciplines, so barrier of entry is high. Nonetheless, with new tools, shared platforms and protocols, various sequences ready to order. Perhaps some super smart undergraduate or graduate student with a lot of time will design or create something much quicker than most of us expect. Boris. And I say, not to fear. Once a pandemic situation unfolds, Jeffrey Epstein and his friend Bill Gates will be there to plan and roll out vaccines and biosecurity strategies while making a lucrative profit. And there's an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Boris Nikolic. He says, a call with you and Bill might be in order. The reaction to the donor advised is just as I predicted. Even more so, I hadn't realized that donors could help Bill with his vaccine program, and by using DAF, it would remain anonymous. And DAF is donor, I forget what it stands for, donor activated funds or something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, it's really messed up. And let's see. There's another email to Bill Gates where he's talking about coordinating on biosecurity planning, like biodefense planning. Like, for example, here's an email. It says, Bill, Larry and I have been working on deliverables. That's like pitches for biosecurity measures, like pitching for it to become policy, like lobbying, I believe. Larry and I have been working on deliverables from my time at BGC3 since you and I spoke. At Larry's request, I have spoken with Roger, Mark, Chris, Trevor, Geoff, or Jeff, and next week, Bose, Jonah. Everyone has offered guidance, advice, thoughts, and ideas. As Larry works to put together any required documentation, we are trying to make sure that we make this time valuable for all. 2 areas where I am interested in terms of scope, domestic health and neurotech brain science. I propose these as deliverables. Please let Larry and I know what you think. Deliverables. 1. To improve access and secure personal health data and or blueprint and or recommendations for a zero knowledge proof based digital system to secure private personal health information while allowing access to digitally redacted personal information. 2. White paper on consumer health expenditures in the USA. 3. White paper and or recommendations on neurotechnologies related to chronic /degenerative disease. 4. White paper on neurotechnologies as weapons in national intelligence and defense. 5. Follow-up recommendations and or technical specifications for strain pandemic simulation. That kind of goes into the idea of the simulant tests, the biological simulant tests that they used to run as a simulation of a bioterror attack. So he's probably all wrapped up in simulant tests as well. And he's also in correspondence with this guy, Dan Dubno, who's connected to DARPA and national defense. And he would play the role of delivering a pitch for these systems as critical to American biosecurity policy, right? So Jeffrey Epstein is knee-deep in the biodefense industry. There's one email where Dan Dubno sends Epstein an article 2009, bioterror failures criticized about Obama's failure to address the threat of bioterrorism. And then there's another email where Dan is suggesting biodefense preparedness and planning, discussing an outline for these deliverables. And he's like talking about, he says, take the hourglass initiative from the theoretical and conceptual stage and turn it into an active NGO. That's non-governmental organization, for those who don't know. Needed immediately. A business plan, a budget, a timeline for deliverables, and the official 501c3 filing. And he says, advisory board, Nobel types, heavy on biology, and WMD experts, working with existing organizations in some capacities. These include Council on Foreign Relations, Carnegie Endowment for Peace, Center for Biosecurity in Baltimore. Okay? And it's also talking about intelligence and scientific advisors. And later on the email, so it's like a whole list of different like things to plan. And he says, consulting with DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology, and other security entities regarding new technologies that are game changers regarding terror, right? So, bioterrorism. And yeah, it's crazy how much this guy has been wrapped up in this stuff. I didn't realize he was this wrapped up in it. I really didn't. And he seems to be advising Boris Nikolic about how the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation should approach things like disease. There's one email where Jeffrey Epstein, writing to Boris, is saying, disease should be looked at as uncovering the disease algorithm, not solving one example and then on to the next. The problem is not intractable. And then there's another email where he's talking to Mary Erdos, who's an investment manager and executive from the J.P. Morgan Asset and Wealth Management Division. Epstein is discussing R&D and vaccines. R&D stands for research and development, and it's like research for biodefense. Or any type of government area of study and development. Research and development, it's called R&D. He says, I will get more detailed answers, but for now, not sure what you mean by R&D. No input from the foundations into investments. Donors can choose from either a custom-made portfolio or a choice of silos and be able to switch. And later in the email, let's see, he says, too, mostly initially American initially. However, we should be ready with an offshore arm, especially for vaccines. 3, the donor advised limits influence or grants, but allows great flexibility on investments. Anonymity is varied according to both gifts and gifts from. Mary replies, the answer to the R&D question is how do we access the work they have done on the causes they are passionate about, like education and healthcare. Many people view them as subject matter experts, and we are wondering if they would be willing to share that as part of the offering. And Epstein says, yes, that is easy as long as it is done giving emotional credit where due. They are a very, very sensitive bunch that has spent billions, separate from polio. There is little that can be held up as a great success, and even polio is not yet finished. Bill is terribly frustrated. He would like to boost some of the things that are working without taking away from those that are not. Therefore, explaining that this would allow additional money for vaccines must be included in the presentation. So he's not just like this side friend of Bill Gates. He's like definitely wrapped up in the entire in the whole biosecurity arena. And I showed in this article how from as far back as 2003, the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation in the Virgin Islands was funding and established the program for evolutionary dynamics at Harvard University with a $35 million gift to the university. Under the direction of Martin Nowak, the program is one of the first of its kind to study the evolution of molecular biology with the primary use of mathematics. And then from the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation Virgin Islands website, it says, Program for Evolutionary Dynamics. The Program for Evolutionary Dynamics is a graduate department at Harvard University under the direction of Martin Nowak, an evolutionist and professor of mathematics and biology at Harvard. The program studies the evolution of molecular biology with the primary use of mathematics. It is one of the first departments to develop a mathematical model of how cancer cells evolve, as well as infectious bacteria and viruses such as HIV. The program's models have led to key discoveries towards fighting several diseases. More recently, pivotal work has been done in mapping colon cancer resistance to inhibitor drugs, mapping the progression of pancreatic cancer, targeting the topology of minority mutations that drive tumor growth, and creating a database to predict and minimize resistance to HIV drugs. Other current research topics include evolution of cooperation, cancer, viruses, evolutionary game / graph / set theory, pre-life, protocells, eusociality, evolution of construction, population structure, evolution of language, experimental games, and evolutionary economics. Their ambitious goals include curing the world of cancer, infectious disease, selfishness, and inclusive fitness theory. Well, I guess if he wants to cure selfishness, he might as well start with himself. And there's other correspondence, right, where he is talking, trying to establish a meeting with Dr. Ian Lipkin, who is a top microbiologist, pathologist, who would have been a big name in American biodefense and holds an expertise in neurodevelopmental, neoplastic, or cancer, and autoimmune disorders, which is exactly the realm of Eric Traub's stealth bioweapons that cause immune tolerance, neurodegenerative diseases, and cancers. Like, all of this stuff is so my book, The Sleeper Agent, that's pretty much where all of this starts. That book is about where these kinds of weapons started. And you can get that. I left the link for the Amazon. You can also go to thesleeperagent.com, where I have the audiobook for those that have trouble reading. This book right here. Hold on. See this book. And there were a significant number of emails about having to do with herpes virus reactivation and the vagus nerve. And there's one email from a redacted source, but clearly this is Dr. Melanie Walker, MD, a neurosurgeon, who was living in Seattle at the time and was married to Steve Sinofsky, who works for Microsoft. And she emails Epstein about meetings with Bill and a thought about the need to immunize via the vagus nerve. Says, just boarding flight to Seattle. Sorry, I will miss you. Have fun with Stevie. He's still fragile, but a little less negative. Fingers crossed. Hope meetings with Bill productive. And says, had another vagus thought about infectivity. It innervates the throat, both motor and sensory. I believe every single sore throat means vagus is compromised. That's why influenza makes you achy, since it enters nervous system there. I also think where you get some diarrhea and enteric root as well, need to immunize the vagus nerve. And Steve Sinofsky, who is her husband, in 2017 emails Jeffrey Epstein with a link to an article, Bucking FDA, Peter Thiel funds patently unethical herpes vaccine trial. Right? So this herpes virus thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean the STD. Like there's like a whole family of herpes viruses, right, that reactivate when you have immunosuppression and cause serious chronic disease, neurological problems, and cancers. It's like one of the mechanisms of Eric Traub's bioweapons is he was trying to find a way to reactivate dormant viruses already in the host. Those 8 herpes viruses are what he was going after. You have things like Epstein-Barr virus, human herpes virus 6, human herpes virus 7, varicella zoster virus, which is chickenpox. There's also cytomegalovirus. There's also herpes simplex. All of these, though, can be very serious when reactivated from latency. And herpes simplex is neurotropic when reactivated and has oncogenic potential or cancer potential. And there's a 2014 email from a redacted source, probably Melanie Walker, but I'm not sure. I can't say for sure. Tells Epstein that they should start a lab somewhere for vagus nerve experiments. And the way that they're talking, it sounds like they mean off record, like clandestine. Says, let's start a vagus lab somewhere cool that can be edgy and act quickly. Implying not slowed down by regulatory measures, not slowed down by the law. Says, let's start a Vegas lab somewhere cool that can be edgy and act quickly and do it like no other. Check this out. And then the person leaves a Wikipedia link to the vagus nerve. And then there's another email from 2010 showing another redacted source writing to Epstein, says, I think you should fund some cool herpes research that could seriously be revolutionary. Don't worry, it's not money for me. Would you consider it if the experiments and outcomes were plausible? Say yes. My guess is that it would be Q4 till I knew if it was real. P.S. Yes, it would involve the vagus nerve. P.P.S. I would insist that the first paper that results from the work is called What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas. I think it's probably a good possibility that a lot of those are Melanie Walker, because we have confirmation of that in that other one where that's clearly her. I mean, she lived in Seattle and she was married to someone named Steve. So It sounds, it's got to be her. It's got to be her. But as far as some of these other ones, I'm not as sure, but I think it's a good possibility. Good possibility. And yeah, there's another email. It says, they all think about the role of bacteria invading. Vagus will end up being key since its only link by way of enteric and central nervous systems. No one looking at viral stuff in Vegas, which is where I think the big news will be. I wish I could do it. Herpes reactivation from vagal ganglia causing paroxysmal afibrillation. Parkinson's as antiretroviral skin disease affecting nerves. Lou Gehrig, ALS, is botulism-like bug entering through enterics but goes to spine rather than brain, etc. And then Jeffrey Epstein responds with a link, and this link brings you to an article called Probiotic Therapy Alleviates Autism-like Behaviors in Mice. And it's about using a bacterium called Bacteroides phargalum as a probiotic to fix autism. But then when I started researching this a little bit, I found this paper, Non-Toxigenic Bacteroides fragilis, a double-edged sword, showing it may very well instead cause harm. It says, non-toxigenic B. fragilis has been shown to affect the host immune system and interact with gut microbes and pathogenic microbes. Previous studies indicated that certain strains of B. fragilis have the potential to serve as probiotics based on their observed relationship with the immune system. However, several recent studies have shown detrimental effects on the host when beneficial gut bacteria are found in the digestive system or elsewhere. So this would kind of align with what I say in the sleeper agent, where enemies have kind of hijacked our public health system, and they come up with detrimental health measures to hurt us, but they sell it to us as though they're helping us. They sell it to us as a solution. They sell it to us as we're trying to protect against disease. We're trying to help and keep everybody healthy, but what we're doing is actually causing you more harm. Just like Eric Traub, when he was put on the simulant program, when he was put at the top of the biological warfare program, and he was running these simulant tests, they were meant to protect us, but he was actually attacking us with stealth biological weapons released in ticks, and was part of the avian vector program, the bird program. And speaking of which, I am friends with one of the Epstein survivors, Juliet Bryant, and I talked to her because she says that when she was at the island, that little St. James, or whatever it's called, that's what it's called, yeah. She said that he was once meeting with a top ornithologist. That's somebody who studies birds. And she considered that it may have had something to do with spreading disease, because birds are even Eric Traub said, and I talked about it in the sleeper agent, how birds, migratory birds, could be used to spread disease to an enemy country via biowarfare programs, right? And it's interesting because Little St. James is a lot like Plum Island, right? Plum Island is where Eric Traub released all of these infected ticks on shorebirds when he was over here. And Little St. James is kind of like a very comparable island, you could say. So that's not surprising. And I would guess that is why that he was meeting with that top ornithologist. It probably had something to do with these simulant tests. And he's talking about simulant tests with that Bill Gates advisor. And speaking of Lyme disease, I have this other email where it shows that it kind of shows that Epstein and those who he was associated with understood the neurotropic aspects of these stealth bioweapons that impart slow wasting diseases such as Alzheimer's disease and dementia, or Parkinson's disease as well. And then it was this woman Judith McCloskey, right? And she was a director at the Director of the Prevention Alzheimer International Foundation. She says, I am contacting you to suggest a project which would help millions. I am the founder and previous president of the Prevention Alzheimer's International Foundation, registered in Switzerland. Presently, I am director of this new foundation and of International Alzheimer Research Center, a nonprofit medical research center. As I am among the pioneers of this emerging field of research, I am responsible for the development of this project. And it says, as soon as in 1907, Fisher suggested that microorganisms might play a role in senile plaque formation. Amyloidosis is frequently associated with chronic bacterial infections, and experimental amyloidosis can be produced by injection of bacteria or their biologically active components in vitro and in vivo. From 1993, our research focused on the role of various spirochetes in Alzheimer's disease. Increasing amount of observations indicate that several types of spirochetes, including various periodontal pathogen spirochetes, and Borrelia burgdorferi, which is Lyme disease, are involved in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease. Then we have another email from Epstein to someone whose name is redacted, and he says, sorry to hear about your dad. I'm next in New York around the 7th. I can give you all you ever wanted to hear about amyloid, right? So either he knows or he knows somebody who knows all about it. And that is a huge part of these stealth bioweapons, because Eric Traub's LCM virus, the antigen on it would cause this amyloidosis, or this protein misfolding, and basically that's what mad cow disease is. It's a prion disease, but there are slower ones, right? You have like the highly fatal, and it kills you really quick, those like the typical prion diseases. But then you have these other classes that unroll a lot slower. So it still does the same damage, but it's just done at a much slower pace. And there is another email talking about doing experiments, and then again mentions the vagus nerve. And this email source says to Epstein, I've told you and always believed that Parkinson's is an autonomic infectious disease and has nothing to do with degeneration. We can prove this. And I would say that's probably from Melanie Walker, though I can't be sure. And there's another email that Jeffrey Epstein got from a Dr. Gallen's Pill Advised, probably because he signed up for the emails. It was called The Hidden Epidemic of Lyme Disease Free Webinar. And so obviously he's got an interest in this stuff, right? And we already know that from all the emails. And let's see. Oh, here's another really interesting one. Where Epstein and his associates that worked in biodefense and public health understood the mechanisms of stealth biological warfare, particularly mechanisms of immune tolerance, virus reactivation, bioweapons that cause neurodegenerative or wasting diseases. In one email to Martin Nowak, Epstein even seems to have a new watchword that describes these stealth biological weapons, calling it biocryptography. He says, and this is an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Martin Nowak at Harvard. Like I said before, the evolutionary dynamics program that Epstein was funding. He says, I think an example of deception and biocryptography would be the herpes virus. Herpes viruses have acquired a variety of different mechanisms to protect itself from the damaging effects of host immunity. Frequently, these viruses subvert normal immune regulatory functions utilized by the host. This is a typical predator-prey. The focus should be herpes virus genes encoding known or potential immunomodulatory proteins. Include inhibition of complement and antibody function. Herpes virus encoded homologs of cytokines and chemokine receptors and potential disruption of cellular recognition of virally infected targets. So that's pretty significant, especially as it relates to this class of weapons that I basically show the history of in the Sleeper Agent. And there is another email from Michael Citrick, and this guy is he's like a strategic communications for reputation and crisis management. So he basically produces propaganda to try and save your reputation if you've been involved in a scandal. And that's why Epstein was talking to this guy. He's trying to strategize with Epstein, and, obviously for propaganda purposes. And he mentioned biocryptography again. Jeffrey Epstein, he's writing to Mike Citrick, the guy, the crisis and reputation management guy. And he says, spend a minimum of 2 hours a day searching for the world's smartest people, bleeding-edge scientists, and actively involved in the formulation of some of the more esoteric areas of exploration, biocryptography, quantum gravity, multi-dimensional game theory, etc. So biocryptography appears to be a watchword for these stealth biological weapons. And then the same email, well, this was actually from the other guy, or maybe he's replying to it. It says, the other guy wrote, still do charity work, was trip with Clinton, Ehud Barak for charity, still doing charity work and friendly with these people. And it says in red, yes, he is very much involved in philanthropic and charitable work now in healthcare, science, and medicine. Some examples include Mount Sinai Hospital, Arizona State Origin of Life Conference, and give other examples. So this goes on. This goes to show how this guy was very wrapped up in science, our science and public health, and biosecurity, which is very disturbing. And of course, the public health system has been operating under one set of expertise while telling the public something very different. An example of this is how they understand about immune tolerance, but they tell the public something completely different, and they don't tell the public about immune tolerance at all, right? And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for example, has been funding research with NIH to use immune tolerance as a defense strategy, a biodefense strategy. In other words, you create vaccines that disable the immune system instead of creating an actual immunity, which is extremely detrimental. That's just a terrible approach, with little to no benefit, and comes with severe, even catastrophic long-term health effects like chronic disease, neurological disease, and cancer. So 2012, and I've mentioned this article elsewhere. Disease tolerance as a defense strategy, right? And it was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, among other NGOs, and also National Institutes of Health, or NIH. And it's disturbing because that seems to have been the approach for the COVID-19 vaccines. Right? Because the spike protein that they're using segments of SV40 to produce the spike protein. That spike protein stimulates the receptors responsible for immune tolerance, which are toll-like receptors 2 and 1 and toll-like receptors 2 and 6. And now papers are showing that the COVID-19 vaccines cause immune tolerance. There's one that's called IgG4 antibodies induced by repeated vaccination may generate immune tolerance to the SARS coronavirus 2 spike protein. Right? It says in that paper, and I've been saying that since before they even rolled it out, because I know about this stuff, because I wrote about it, because this is the area that I took an expertise in, because I am sick with immune tolerance, and I'm driven by a survival mechanism. I have to understand my disease, right? And that is what I found. Eric Traub had discovered it. But this paper says, however, emerging evidence suggests that the reported increase in IgG4 levels detected after repeated vaccination with the mRNA vaccines may not be a protective mechanism. Rather, it constitutes an immune tolerance mechanism to the spike protein that could promote unopposed SARS coronavirus 2 infection and replication by suppressing natural antiviral responses. It says increased IgG4 synthesis due to repeated mRNA vaccination with high antigen concentrations may also cause autoimmune diseases and promote cancer growth and autoimmune myocarditis in susceptible individuals. And basically my book is telling the story of immune tolerance and how it works, and talking about its godfather, Eric Traub, who was a bioweaponeer. But yeah, I mean, this stuff is basically just the tip of the iceberg. Like, I have barely even cracked the surface. I just wanted to get this article out and this video out, and hope it sparks an interest in people, and they'll start following me so I can tell them about all of the other things I know. And it's not about this is not about ego or anything. Like, this is very important stuff that I know, and I know that it's very important. And it's frustrating because I wish I could reach more people, because it's about health. It's about your well-being. It's about people like Jeffrey Epstein being all wrapped up in our biodefense or biosecurity, being all wrapped up in our public health system, like funding research that will be used by our public health system, funding research that will, or funding deliverables that will be delivered in the hopes of creating policies, right? So, that's basically, I will leave the link to the article in the description box. I'm also going to upload this video directly to the article. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I deal with chronic disease every day. Like, I have to deal with, my life is like, it's like an obstacle course of chronic health problems. Like, recently, like, you might notice that my eyes are a bit red. Like, for some reason, they have been so itchy. Like, I've been, like, all day. All last night, just, like, itching my eyes, like, and this is, like, how the disease plays out. It's just, like, constant issues, and they're always, like, evolving. They're always, like, different. Nothing is ever consistent except for the fact that you consistently feel chronic disease, but there's always these symptoms that just are always changing, and it's crazy. Like, just the stuff that I deal with since I got sick in 2016, it's really, really something. But it just makes your life like a living hell. This winter I've been way sicker than usual. I mean, probably because I've been trapped inside and I haven't been able to get out much because of the snow and the shitty weather. But hopefully, warm weather will be back soon and I can get back out on my bike every day. 'Cause that was a big thing, is getting fresh air and stuff. But yeah, I've been way sicker than usual this past winter. And yeah, lately it's like my eyes, they will not stop itching. It drives me crazy. But I'm glad I got this article done today, and I want to attach this video to it. So check it out. And with that said, everybody, take care of yourself, be yourself, build yourself, and I will see you on the other side.